Well, welcome to the podcast, Wave On fans out there. Thanks for tuning in. Podcast 55 here. We also have the podcast on YouTube, so make sure you hit subscribe in all of those places that you preference on how you listen to the podcast. We do the video portion, so we got that one this time. Got some dates to throw out. The season is ramping up, and I'm putting some things out on the calendar, some things on Facebook as reminders. So first one actually is June 11th. It's a gear demo day, but we also have a newbie class going on as well that day. So we'll get started at 11 a.m. on Sylvan Lake. And the next dates after that are going to start to look like regular scheduled classes. So the first one that I have up on there is June 16th, but I think we're going to get it started a little bit sooner than that. The next big date actually is June 23rd. That's Board, Bar, and Bubbles. So very fun sunset night. We'll do a sunset guided paddle tour, and all levels are welcome for both events, whether you're new to paddleboarding or new to bar. This is a tagged event, so we'll have 3 of those actually this summer with Carly. She was on the last episode 54, and she describes her background and everything that she knows about teaching and her career within leading movement. So she's so super awesome. We've held them in the past, and we're looking forward to do that again. So that June 23rd, that's the first kickoff for that one. Then we'll have another one in July and August. We are servicing 2 lakes this year, Sylvan Lake and another one, Teeple Lake, a smaller lake in White Lake. A lot of lakes in the area. June 26th is the first one for that. And then that's a Sunday during the day paddle. And then we'll have another one on June 28th at 6:30. That'll be a sunset. And we'll take it from there. We'll see how it goes. We've got a sale on lip balms. So that's on the website, Lunamoon, SUPyoga.com. Lunamoon SUP Yoga, and go there, check it out. I'll put a link in the description for that. I might put some other links in there for some of the events, but we're really looking forward to an awesome summer. We're just getting a headway. New boards are going to be in stock, so those will be at the demo day as well as some other accessories. So if you're looking for advice on your own gear, or maybe to upgrade it in a paddle or an inflator. Let me get that straight. I'm talking way too fast. Anyway, Lunamoon, SUPyoga.com. Go there, check it out. And we've got the member app as well through GlowFox. If you want to download that member app, it'll be on the website, a link there for Apple or Android. So let's dive into this podcast, episode 55. And I got a good friend, and actually a very well knowledgeable and open-minded paddleboarder, hiker. She's an all-around outdoor enthusiast. So let's tune in. Oh, how awesome to have you onto the show, Stefanie. You're like the outdoor adventurist out there, living in the out in the West, where it's rainy here today, and I'm just enjoying your backdrop. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks so much, Misty. I'm really excited to chat with you. And yes, sunny San Diego. It's usually 75 and sunny. Can't go wrong.
Yeah, and any of your pictures or posts that I see, of course, I'm like, oh, it must be so nice.
Well, it's interesting, though, because in May and June, we have May gray and June gloom. And that's usually by the coast. And people who come to visit, they're always so disappointed. They're like, oh, it's quite cloudy. It's gray today. I'm like, just wait till noon. You'll be fine. And it always turns out to be a great day.
Yeah, I haven't been out in California in a while, and I just love visiting out there. No matter what, it's just such a unique experience from being out here, like in Michigan, Midwest. So I always enjoy it all.
Well, yeah, I guess we're super lucky too, because we have like the ocean, the desert, and then the mountains. The only thing we kind of lack here in San Diego is we don't have any lakes or rivers to really paddle on. So you're mostly in bays. We're lucky there's one reservoir that lets us paddle, and then the ocean. So
Wow.
So it's a little different here. You're pretty lucky because you have lots of lakes to paddle on, right?
Yeah, this is true. And if you talk to anybody, I mean, I'm not that close to the west side of the state where Lake Michigan. I'm not too far either, but some of those guys that live really close to the coast, they're dying to see storms come through because they'll get out there and surf it.
Right. Yeah. Actually, I saw somebody surfing on Lake Ontario once, which totally blew my mind, and just by Toronto. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, they're a little far and few in between the numbers. So if anybody, or I guess in their world, that's an advantage because they're not like waiting in a big lineup or anything. And they could, it's like the wave is there. So they just go for it.
Yeah, it was kind of interesting. On Easter, we tried to go out to practice some SUP surfing, and you get there and you're like, it doesn't look too good. Oh, it's okay. We don't need to do this today. We can come back tomorrow or another day. So I guess that's one of the benefits, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I got the pros and the cons, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Well,
Definitely.
I definitely enjoy seeing some of your posts that you put out there. They're pretty inspiring. Like I said, just being within the distance, and then I mean, you being a strong advocate in outdoor adventure, and and listening to some of your clubhouse. I mean, even though before we just started recording, you haven't been on much, and neither have I. And in a way, I sort of missed that. I don't know what happened, but I definitely heard or liked hearing about other people's aspects and where they get to hike or camp and all those different scenarios.
Oh, me too. I mean, like the talks on Clubhouse were so inspiring, hearing everyone, whether they were paddling, whether they were hiking, back camping, canoe tripping. Um, it just, it's like going on Instagram, right? And seeing everybody's posts, and you see all these fantastic places. And I mean, there's pros and cons, right? You don't want a place of nature to get overrun by people, and then it just becomes something like a Disneyland, for example, and everybody's just there to get their photo on like a famous spot. But how else are you going to find out about a lot of these places? And I mean, it does inspire a lot of people who maybe never thought that they would hit the outdoors to actually get outside and experience everything that nature has to offer. So, as much as I love social, I hate social all at the same time, because,
Yeah.
you don't really want to be on that trail, or even paddling where, you have somebody that has a musical device and they're just blaring music. Even if it's a song you love, it's
Hmm.
kind of like, oh, I would have liked to have heard the birds, or, you're scaring away an animal that maybe I would have seen had you not been blaring this music. So, there's always a bit of a challenge out there.
Do you experience that quite a bit with, I mean, California being pretty popular, or just popular places to even travel? Do you experience a lot of that?
With regards to music on the trails, or just a lot of people
Or
on the
just
trail?
more people, or even just the fact of more people finding out about certain places, and whether they're intentionally, not like walking away with what they came with, like that little aspect, or I mean, for example, YouTube, I can remember shed some light on some places to go to in Hawaii, and very remote, and and Hawaii doesn't really advertise a lot of their stuff. This was all just found by, well, whoever wrote the book or posted the YouTube video, and then the coral kind of got damaged, and maybe they didn't, their intention probably wasn't to do that, but over time, and just the lack of knowledge probably contributed to those factors.
Oh, definitely. I mean, there's a local place here where I've hiked quite often, and I actually don't really go there anymore, just because so many people. It's a really cool spot. It's about a 3 mile, so like 5 kilometer hike, uh, somewhat we would consider hard. And but then there's a flat rock that just juts out. It kind of looks like this, and it's called Potato Chip Rock. And I'm not sharing any secrets, so if anybody wants to Google it, they'll definitely find it. Um, but there are lines now, like an hour or two long, just to go get your picture taken on the rock.
Wow.
I'm not kidding you. So then you
Wow.
have a lot of trash, right? Because
Mhm.
people just assume that someone's going to clean up all your garbage that you leave behind. And that's not the case. So it's kind of like whatever you bring with you, take out with you. And then unfortunately, some people are ill prepared for that hike. It's very exposed. There's no shade, for example. I've seen people, like families of maybe 4 people, and they've got one water bottle, like this size, for all 4 of them. And I'm like,
oh, wow.
Oh man, you are not going to make it up to the top, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or at least maybe you'll make it, but you'll be severely dehydrated. So, I mean, yeah, we're seeing lots and lots of people now out on the trails. And maybe they're just not as prepared for it as they should be, right? Like when it says this is a hot, hard hike, yeah, it's a hot, hard hike. Bring lots of water. Like people aren't kidding, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or, you get people in flip-flops and you're like,
wow.
okay, you're doing this hike in flip-flops. Maybe not the best shoe selection,
Mm-hmm.
or no hats, right? And I think that happens out on the water too sometimes. Like people don't think, oh, I should take water with me when I go stand up paddle, or I should be wearing a hat or long sleeves. They're like, oh, I'm going out on the lake, I'm wearing my bikini, right? Because that's what you normally wear in the water.
Yeah.
But the sun damage, it's so like dangerous now.
It's so true. I mean, a few points there. It's like, you think you're stating the obvious by, like, I just put together kind of this water safety little checklist. Nothing fancy, nothing advanced. But I felt like when I even presented it the other day, I was like, I sound like I'm stating the obvious. But then I also know what you just said, like people take it for granted, or they just don't think, or they see the water and they're like, yay, it's finally 80 degrees here in Michigan, let's go. And like one of the bullet points I said was to at least wear bright clothing, like basically so a motorboat could see you, just even if you are in broad daylight, like maybe you're going more or less at 6 o'clock and it's starting to get dark and you might be in the tree line or something, like just any of those scenarios, right? And then yeah, I'll use Clubhouse, I guess, as an example for not everybody's going to hear it, but you never know who you might come across that you say these things and then you've kind of give them a little bit of education, like, oh yeah, cool, I do want to start hiking, but I never thought of all those things. And it's a little bit of educational, whether you feel like you're repeating yourself or not.
Yeah, and it's always a good reminder for everyone, right? Like I found myself at times going, why didn't I bring more water? Or one time we went on a mountain bike ride and I'm like, oh, do I need my headlamp? Now, if I was hiking, that headlamp would have been in my day pack, right? One of my 10 essentials. Always carry the headlamp. You never know what's going to happen. You might get stuck out there.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason on this mountain bike ride, I didn't bring my headlamp and we wound up there was lots of trails and it was like, oh, which way should we go? And we kind of got lost, but we knew where we were. So lost, but you know where you are. And no headlamp and it got dark. Well, I'm not that great of a mountain biker. And then add the element of I can't see the ground. And so now I'm walking my bike the last 2 miles or 3 kilometers back to the car. And I was like kicking myself going, really? Why didn't I bring my headlamp? Right? Like, yes, I had my cell phone, but I wanted to make sure I didn't use all my battery power on the lamp part of the cell phone. Like everybody thinks, well, I have my cell phone.
Right.
But yeah, so that was just a stupid mistake. And I'm experienced. So, I mean, we all do it. We're not perfect. And, but it's good, good lessons to learn.
Definitely, for sure.
Kind of thing.
What has been
now, if I go paddling, I was going to say, if I go paddling, I'm not carrying a headlamp usually. But if we do go late in the day or go night paddling, carry like a waterproof headlamp or maybe those Lucy lights. I don't know. Have you seen those? They're inflatable solar lights.
I have, yeah.
You can attach. Yeah. So those are really cool to take out at night too.
Yeah.
And then some of my friends have the actual light strip that goes underneath your board so you can see what's underneath. That's really cool.
Those are really cool. Yeah. I got a set of those like at the end of the season last year. So right now the water is still pretty clear enough to see, without the boats like stirring it up. And it
Yeah.
should get a little bit warmer maybe where I could try it out again.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. I don't have those, but they look just so awesome. Oh, airplane. I don't know if you can hear it.
Just a little bit. It's all right. And so you're
Yeah.
originally from Toronto and you're in San Diego. That's amazing.
Right.
Toronto's not too far from me in Michigan.
Yeah, well, I was lucky this summer. I got to go up to Toronto and spend some more time there. So it was really fun to meet up with friends and paddle at Center Island. That was pretty cool. Forgot about that. And then on the Humber River as well. So that was neat to get out and paddle there. I actually wish that I had my inflatable with me
Yeah.
because I totally wanted to go down from the top of the Humber River from the dam area and take it all the way down. I thought that would have been cool. Like there are some mini rapids along the way, and I thought, well, an inflatable, other than it getting caught on something and like, splicing open, it would have been awesome just to experience it.
Do you know anybody that's done that?
I think Mary Beth has been on some of the different areas.
Probably.
Yeah. Like probably. She's always out for an adventure.
Yeah, exactly. Beavers and all kinds of things.
Yeah. Super lucky. I'm kind of bummed out that I didn't get to catch up with her while I was there because I think it would have been so much fun to like meet in real life.
Oh, that would have been awesome. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. So, and you also came back from a really cool trip, and I don't think I've seen any posts or anything about it. So I don't know. Maybe I'm diving in too early about the adventure you had.
Yeah, you're like the first person to hear all about it. Really, we got back this weekend, so we went to Costa Rica for 1 week to a SUP surf camp, and it was really cool. It was at Blue Zone SUP, and they had a couple of coaches there, and they were just fantastic. Like, I mean, Joe Sue, he really spent the time with us to teach us the basics of just your surf stance, which is a little bit different than we would normally find in stand-up paddling, just, when you're cruising the flat waters and things like that. Really focused a lot on pivot turns, which I found really interesting. And then out in the ocean, we went to like 3 different spots and, stand-up paddle surfed. And I had done a little bit here in San Diego, but it's so much nicer in Costa Rica, let me tell you. Because for those of you who don't know, the water in San Diego is cold. Like even in August, let's say it's really refreshing, and wetsuits are kind of normal for at least 8 months of the year, at least for me, because I'm usually really cold out there. But in Costa Rica, like, no wetsuits needed other than rash guards. And you definitely, one tip, if you go down there, you need to wear a surf hat. And just like a baseball cap won't do, because once you hit those waves, that cap is gone, kind of thing, right? So something that has a strap underneath. And that's one thing I wish I would have brought with me, but Josu was super nice and he lent me one of his. So
nice.
That was really, really great.
That is unique.
I highly recommend. What's that?
That is unique.
Yeah, it's something that you don't really think about, right? When you're on flat water, you just wear like a baseball cap or a hiking hat or something. But when you're in the surf, you really need something that's tied down.
Yeah. So
that when you get taken down, like even with a chin strap, that hat came off sometimes because the waves were so fierce.
Wow. And the sun's that intense, right?
It is. It really, really is. And like here in San Diego, sometimes I'll wear sunglasses with croquis attached to them if I'm out in the surf, but the waves aren't as powerful, at least when I've been going out, right? Like I'm a beginner. So the glasses seem to stay on my face, but I think in Costa Rica, they would have been gone. I would have lost them.
More powerful waves in Costa Rica, right?
Well, I think just where I think it was the time of year and the swells that were coming in and the waves that we were experiencing. And of course, like I said, I was a beginner. So, I would have liked smaller waves, but then I was with more advanced people as well. So there were, depending on when the swell was coming in and which wave sets were coming in, there were some that were larger. And the people who are more advanced were like, yes, and they were out on those.
Yeah.
And then when a smaller set came in, I was really excited and I would catch those waves. And so, but overall, yes, they were larger waves than what I've experienced here at the shores. But like this weekend, the La Jolla shores, they're experiencing big waves too and more forceful. So, I mean, it's all about going to, the apps and looking at the wave charts and things like that. And I'm still learning. Like, I would love if everybody has any YouTube videos that they want to recommend for me to watch and learn. I'm totally in 100% and trying to just understand the different apps like Surfline and Magic Seaweed.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you've looked at any of those ever, but.
Well, I have like off and on a little bit. I don't get to honestly, I don't get to experience a whole lot of that. The so I do have a trip planned for out east, and I'm thinking like, yeah, I want to try SUP surfing, and I'll bring my wetsuits, of course, because it's still going to be chilly. But I know I probably won't have it right away. I haven't even surfed in a while. Like it's been probably 5 years since I've even surfed. And, you remember learning to surf on a longboard first. And I did try a shorter board. I knew it was going to be the wrong thing to do, but I just wanted to see. I was like, okay, really, what is the difference? I know you learn better on a longboard, and I'm used to longboards because of paddleboarding, but let's just try this. I don't remember what size it was. It could have been 8 or 7 feet long. I don't know. And yeah, it was not the same experience at all. Like I was doing much better with the longboard, and the shorty board, just every time I would just fall and just eat it, like, and I mean, and that was to be expected, but I just wanted to know for myself. Now I feel like I have been out of it for so long, like as far as bigger waves, that, yeah, we'll just see what happens, because I'll need probably another like lesson of some sort, and I'll start watching some videos or whatever, but it's such a different game, and it's unfortunate that I've been away from like from the ocean that long, but it is what it is. So
yeah. Definitely. So did you do prone surfing or stand-up surfing?
I did stand-up surfing. But you learn with the whole prone first, and actually you had instructor behind you who would kind of give you that push too. So that would help,
Okay.
like get you into the wave, and then, like you'd paddle a little bit, but it was like immediately you'd start to stand up. And these weren't really big waves. I bet they were considered more rollers for anybody that was just experienced or advanced. And I was just like, oh, this is more than enough wave for me. Thank you very much.
So what I learned was when I was down in Costa Rica. So you know how you were taught, you're kind of probably in that white water
Yep.
section where the instructor's behind you, and then you're lying down on the board, paddle, 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 pop up,
Yeah.
and you catch, and you're usually in that white fluffy stuff, right? Coming into the shore kind of thing. Well, for stand-up paddling, it's really hard to catch a wave when you're standing up on your board and you have to paddle, paddle, paddle in that whitewash, I guess is what it's called.
Yeah.
And it's a lot harder. So that was really interesting to learn. But yeah, I'm going to say if you do decide to do stand-up paddle surfing on your next trip, practice your pivot turns in the lake beforehand, and be in a staggered stance. I don't know if you paddle parallel or if you paddle staggered with one foot ahead of the other one, but I would highly recommend start paddling in that staggered stance if you can, and then really work on your pivot turns.
Perfect.
Because basically what it all boiled down to was if you could get that stance and really have that flexion in your knees and be able to, stand up and then compress and come back down, that just is really what you needed in the ocean. And to actually get out, right? Because you've got that surf break.
Yeah, right.
That was, yeah. Yeah, I have some stories about the surf break, right?
And then you have your paddle with you, right? So it has to add a little bit of a struggle.
Well, what Josu taught me was to put the paddle on the board and with the blade at the end of the board, and then push down on the end of the board so that the board would raise up and go over the wave as it comes to you.
Okay.
And then, the best tip ever is not to be between you, like to have, let me re-say this. You don't want to be on one side of the board and then the wave on the other side of the board. So you always want to be in between the wave and the board. Otherwise, that board might come crashing into you.
Okay.
Right. So even for those ocean paddlers that are heading out there and they don't have any interest in actually being in the surf, they just want to get out there and paddle.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to get through the break sometimes. So I thought those were really good tips that he gave me.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah, and one other tip, and I had never considered it really as a stand-up paddler. He was like, you're not really that strong when you're on your knees. You're stronger when you're paddling out on your feet because you can have that compression and you can tilt the board back and tip it back with your back leg and things like that to get over the wave. So that was super helpful. And then the other thing, which I never thought about, was almost being like a regular surfer, right? That you're lying on your board and just put that paddle under your chest and paddle out. So I did that a lot when I was, after catching a wave and maybe falling in and not being as successful and being able to turn and get back out.
Yeah.
It was just really quickly get back on that board and just on my stomach with the paddle underneath me and then just paddle out away from the surf, the waves. So that way they weren't crashing on me. Because it's a lot of energy that you're expending
mm-hmm.
with one wave hitting you after the other, right?
Yeah, totally. I do remember being pretty tired surfing after, I think the first day and a half. The second day, it was either second or third day that I tried to go back out. And I was like, I'm exhausted from the previous days.
Oh, yeah. I was like, I think that the people who don't fall in as much aren't as tired because you're spending all this energy to pop yourself back up on the board constantly, right?
Yeah.
So.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And so the paddle prone is like to get past the break. You can paddle prone and get past the break with your paddle too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm trying to envision it just like with surfing, but without the paddle. And I can remember like definitely doing, even in Lake Michigan, when some waves do happen, to get the board out past the wave break, to pop the nose up a little bit if you're standing and try to get out that way. And those waves are, usually not that big if you're out there in the summer because you're probably not in the storm like when those guys are surfing. Completely different.
Yeah, definitely.
So how many days did you get to surf?
6.
Wow.
We went out every day and sometimes twice a day.
Amazing.
So
that's awesome.
So it was a lot of fun. I did go back to basics and spend time. There was a river mouth at one of the locations. So we were in Nosara, Costa Rica, and one of the surf spots is called La Boca, for the mouth, and it's the river mouth. And I'm kind of glad that I didn't see these creatures, but kind of wanted to see a saltwater crocodile because they were there at the river, but we didn't see any.
Oh, wow.
But we went back into the river and we really practiced that staggered stance and also pivot turns on the boards. Because, the board is it's a smaller board, less leaders than a normal stand-up paddle board. And it was great to actually spend time and go back to the basics and really work on technique there, and then transferring that out to the ocean, right?
Nice.
In one way, I wish I would have spent more time here in San Diego before going to Costa Rica, practicing those skills. So therefore, I could have taken them out to the ocean and spend more of my time in the ocean and on the waves. But you know, when you kind of self-teach, and I think a lot of people do this with stand-up paddling, is you get a paddleboard, you go out onto the lake, you're like, it's not that hard. You take the paddle, you put it in the water, and off you go, and you're moving, right?
Yeah.
But I think that, you know, when it comes to if you're deciding to race or if you're going to decide to do surfing, I think it's really wise for people maybe to take some lessons. Even if you're a beginner and all you want to do is cruise the lake, right, recreationally, I think it's a really good decision to take some lessons with someone who's very experienced, certified instructor, just to get the proper form and technique, and tips. Like, you know, we were just talking about lifting the nose of the board, right, and where to be when you're on the water. Just things like that. I just think it's really helpful, and I kind of wish that I had maybe done some lessons here with someone who is, you know, a stand-up paddle surfer that could have given me some of this advice that I could have worked on ahead of time. I mean, I watched some YouTube videos, but until you actually go out and put that into motion, it's really hard.
It is, definitely. Definitely.
And the thing, what I really liked about Josu is, and this is at Blue Zone SUP that they do this, and I think a lot of the SUP surf camps kind of do this, is they videotape you.
Oh, cool.
And so like during our morning sessions, everybody got videotaped on a bunch of different waves. And then we would come back to the house and we would watch these videos. And then, you know, at first you're kind of like, oh, I don't think I want to be critiqued in front of all these people that I don't know. But who cares, right? You're there to learn, you're there to improve. And, you know, the way he broke things down and explained them to us, and, you know, he's got the whiteboard out and he drew things for us, and just, it was excellent, right? For them to break down and pointing out, like stopping the video at your feet and being able to see how your foot might not be over the stringer, or if it's on the rail, or your knees aren't bent. Like, I'm tall, so I'm 6'1". So when people say get down low, I'm like, I am low. They're like, look at the video. I'm like, why am I standing up so tall? Like,
at least you have good proper stance, right? Standing tall and not hunched over.
Yeah, but in surfing, you want to have your knees bent, right? Like, yeah, you don't want to be over, but you want to be low. So,
yeah, totally.
I mean, and it was great to see yourself, and also the other people, like learning, even though that these people were much more advanced from me. And when Josu would talk about, you know, how they could improve their technique and what they could do, I'm learning. Like, I'm not there right now, but when I get there, at least I'll be remembering some of those tips that he shared.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did they have any books or manuals that they kind of suggested, or?
No, I mean, Chase has done a bunch of YouTube videos, so that, and he's really broken down stuff really well there as well. But they didn't recommend any books to read or other types of materials. I don't know if I would learn from a book all that well.
Yeah.
You know, I think seeing it and actually doing it, and then having somebody critique you on what you were doing right or wrong, is probably the best way to learn. And interesting how a lot of information transfers over. Like if you're a snowboarder or a skier, right? Even a mountain biker.
Just thinking of snowboarding.
Like, yeah, I'm kind of like, there's something that I remembered is speed is your friend. And I'm like, think about skiing, right? You're like, oh, or snowboarding. Oh, I don't want to go so fast because then I'll be kind of out of control and I'll fall down, right?
Yeah.
Or even mountain biking, when you're going down a hill and there's lots of rocks, you're like, I want to go slow. They're like, speed it up, because you need that momentum to go. And that's the same with surfing. Like when you see those waves, when some of them are bigger, you're like, I'm not catching that. And they're like, okay, this little roller is going to take you nowhere. Like you're not even going to, it's not going to take you anywhere. Don't even waste your energy on it, kind of thing. So, but then when they're too big, I love that they taught us, just jump off the board.
Just jump off?
Just jump off, like bail. And I guess depending on where you are, like you have to know how deep the water is and what's underneath.
Mm-hmm.
But if the waves are too big, just bail off the board in a safe manner. So whether that means if you're like over a reef and stuff, falling backwards, but never in a line with the board, always to the side.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're in direct alignment with the board, if it comes back, it might hit you. But if it comes back and you're not in alignment with it, you should be okay.
Okay. Are you wearing a leash?
Yeah. Yes, definitely.
You're attached to the board.
Yeah, and we had a couple of people who their leashes broke. So it's always really important to check your gear before heading out. If there's any knots in the leash, make sure that you undo those knots because that's an easy spot where the leash could potentially break.
Yeah.
I did have a leash that didn't have the full Velcro, and I looked at it when I put it on, and I was wearing booties because there was a reef there, and rocks, and I didn't want to, bang up my feet. So when I put the leash around my ankle, it actually wasn't what I would consider large enough to go around. And when I put it on, I was like, I don't know about this leash. Thought, well, they put it on my board, it must be okay. And so this is like word to wise, always check things and ask questions, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And the leash just kind of came off my foot when I got hit by a second wave, and the board just took off. And I was like, oh no, now I have to go swim for that board.
Oh,
but
yeah.
super lucky. The coach went over and got it for me. And then he was like, this isn't the leash for this board. And so he changed it out and gave me his, which was really great. We didn't have to go all the way back in to get another leash. But those are just things, right? Like that.
Yeah.
You've got to look at.
Definitely.
When you're purchasing your gear and your equipment and taking good care of things. And even sometimes what happens is you get grass or like seaweed and stuff in the leash, in the Velcro part, and then it just doesn't stick as well. So it's always good to like clean your leash and make sure it's in good condition. And of course, rinsing it after salt water because salt water kills everything. So. Yeah,
that's a good point. That's just like your even Velcro, whatever you have on your jacket, and it starts to collect lint or cotton and whatnot. Same thing, except probably more outdoorsy type of stuff on the leash.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And then they did share another tip with me that I thought was fantastic to know is if you are in the surf and the board, you do fall off, is to kind of bring your knees up to you so that when the waves hit, you release your legs as the board gets taken so you don't feel that jarring, jerking motion.
Oh.
Because if you're already straight, then it's just pulling you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if your knees are kind of into your chest, then you kind of relax and release your legs, and then you don't have that same jarring motion.
Oh,
like
wow.
all good tips that I picked up.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now, what happens to your paddle if you fall in?
Hold on to it.
Just keep holding on to it.
It's interesting that I did not lose the paddle. Like I never let go of the paddle. And I don't know if that's from when I was a little kid and I would canoe. And you always made sure you held onto the paddle no matter what, right? So, yeah, I never lost the paddle. But yeah, if you do lose it, go swim after it because they do float.
Gotta go find it. Board could be this way.
Go find it.
Leash or your paddle is over here, maybe. You never know. So you gotta. I mean, it's funny because like flat water. When I teach them and they say they do get worried about their paddle, and I'm like, don't worry about your paddle. We got to get you back on your board. The paddle floats. We'll get to it. But that's me with them as like someone who's new trying to get acclimated to a paddleboard. and just the steps and process of what they do as far as like getting on it, standing, and then if they fall, what happens, all of those little steps.
Yeah, and I have to say, I think sometimes, when we're on a board, whether it's flat water, ocean, whatever, sometimes we're really trying hard to stay on the board. Whether you're using a bracing mechanism by smacking that paddle down just to stay on, but sometimes it's like you're better off just falling in because the chances are, like, I know that I've fallen forward on my board sometimes. Well, you can easily break a hand. Or something else, right? Because, or let's say you fall back on the board and you hit your tailbone on the board. The water is a lot softer. But I know everybody's kind of like, oh, I don't want to fall in. I don't want to fall in.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like, oh, just fall in. Who cares? Right? Like,
yeah, especially on the ocean with waves. I mean, just better off to get in.
Yeah, well, when we came back, I actually went out for a paddle in the harbor, and it was kind of really choppy. And, well, it was so cool. I have to tell you this. We saw dolphins, 5 of them.
Nice.
So neat.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, but the water was really choppy, and I was on a 14-foot stand-up paddleboard, but it was a flat-bottom one, more made for the flat water like a lake versus the choppy ocean water. But I was out there on that board. And of course, the board, there was so much side chop that I just got tossed into the water. And it's kind of like, you don't expect to go into the water when you're on your stand up in the harbor, but hey, it happened.
Yeah.
And of course I got soaked, and I'm like, oh, well, I don't really care. It's still fun out here. It wasn't that cold.
Yeah.
We kept paddling, but I think I was almost in that attitude of, oh, just fall in, who cares? Because I was doing that for a whole week, right? And so I didn't even try to save myself. I was just like, yeah, whatever.
What was the size board that you had out in Costa Rica?
The first board I tried was 130 liters, so maybe 9 feet by 31. And then I moved up to a board that had about 160 liters. So it was a more stable board. And I think that was 9.6 by 30 or 31. It was a Jimmy Lewis Super Frank. So the first one was a Super Frank. The second one was a Super Frank Lean.
Wow.
By Jimmy Lewis. And they had all these boards there. So that was a carbon fiber board. Super nice. And then for paddle, I was using the Quick Blade, I think a UV. It was like, it's like a hybrid paddle, but it has like the V-drive shape. And so that was nice. It's very similar to a paddle I have at home. The other thing I learned too was when you stand up paddle surf, your paddle is a lot shorter than when you do traditional paddling in a lake.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So, yeah. And I guess it depends too, because a lot of the racers have shorter paddles now, even for racing, just because they're getting lower when they're paddling. So if you're standing up taller, as most beginners are, your paddle is usually really long. And then as you become more experienced, that paddle gets shorter. Right.
Yeah, that is a good point. Yeah, the racers are typically a little bit shorter than how you get adjusted for just, recreational, your lake paddles. Yeah,
and the other thing too is a lighter paddle is much nicer. It's not just because it's, the heavier or lighter, but and a thinner blade, because you can get that cadence up. Right. So you can paddle a lot faster and get that board moving, which you need to catch a wave. I think sometimes people forget about that when they're going up just recreational paddling in a lake or something like that.
Yeah.
They're just like, oh, whatever paddle, who cares? But I think the paddle is super, super important if you're going to be paddling a lot.
Even if you are on the lake, if you do it a lot, you should probably have nice equipment that is not so taxing, like on your shoulders. If you're doing it a lot, or you are an instructor, you're going to want nicer, something a little bit more lightweight versus the usually the typical 3-piece metal and plastic paddle that comes with your paddle board.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, interestingly, we ordered a inflatable SUP because we went to Lake Havasu I guess in December, and we just had it delivered directly there because we had another inflatable, but it got a leak, and we had it repaired and patched, and then we had a leak in another spot. So it was like, okay, forget this. And then we went away and we're like, oh, we need another inflatable. So we just ordered it online to be delivered there. I guess the luxury of, 2-3 day delivery.
Yeah.
But the paddle that came with it was just not great. I mean, it just was like, oh, this sucks.
Yeah. It's, it's the truth, because paddles alone by themselves can cost quite a bit of money depending on the materials it's using. And there's no way you could get that kind of good deal or bargain with the whole complete setup.
Exactly. And, you've got to get a paddle sized for you, right? So for your weight and height, getting the right type of blade, depending on the kind of paddler you are. I mean, this gets so technical that I don't fully understand it. And that's why I have, you talk to people. You talk to people at the shop. You talk to the manufacturers. You ask them questions. And if you can try things out before you buy them, that's what I always recommend, right?
Yeah. It's so true. Yeah, it's all educational, and it's fun because it is situational, where if you're, depending on where you're paddling and what kind of water it is, and then based upon you alone, your size and everything, and but then just picking leashes, coiled or long, and it's like there's so much out there, and it's just such a growing sport that it's kind of the beauty behind it. There's still room to learn. I mean, I'm a teacher and instructor, to certify, but I still like to learn, and I know that there's enough to learn because, well, I mean, I'm in fresh water for number one. There's that, aspect against the ocean. I have a lot to learn about the ocean, quite honestly.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It's always learning, right? Because Mother Nature is constantly changing. Even if you're out in the lake and fresh water, I mean, all of a sudden the weather changes, the water's changing, the currents are changing. How do you change? How do you change your stance? What are you doing with your stroke? It gets super, super windy. But you still want to be outside. You still want to enjoy it. You don't want to go, oh, it's windy today, I'm not going to go paddle.
Right.
Right. Maybe, yes. Maybe that is the case because you're like, oh, I can go do something else. Right. But, okay, it is windy. What do I need to do differently when I'm going to go out for my paddle today? Things to think about. Right.
Oh, totally. I mean, even the inland lake here, it can get so windy. And there's Lake Michigan, which is a different scenario. And, it can change. It's like we were out the other day, not on the water, but just surrounded by the water. So actually, this little community event thing that I was doing, and we're standing there, and all of a sudden it just got super windy. Like we're grabbing things, trying to hold it down, and I'm like, exactly, that can happen anytime that you're on the water, standing on a paddleboard, even like. It happens, and even though we're all staying there, we've been out all day, and it's been super still, and all of a sudden, it just picked up and got a little gusty, and things were blowing around, and I'm looking at this side of the lake, or the left side of the lake, and the other, and then across from me, and it reads completely different, and it's funny, is it's just an inland lake, Hey,
have you been doing any paddling on rivers yet? With rapids?
I have not really, but I have been thinking a little bit more about it because this year I want to try to maybe adventure out a little bit with especially some of the people that have come out for classes more often, and I know them and they're getting experience. We might try to venture and make more of a destinational spot. I don't know about a lot of rapids though, but we do have quite a few rivers that have some good current where you might do a little downstream paddle and get picked up and do maybe a shuttle.
Yeah, that's the way to do it, right? Don't try to go back up. We actually did a really cool paddle a few years ago. We started at the Hoover Dam, and we paddled the Colorado River.
Oh, wow.
And that was really neat, right? Like to be at
Nice.
the bottom of the dam area. Of course, you can't get through the roped off part, and you do have to have a special permit to get to start there.
Okay.
You can paddle up to there and then paddle back down to a different area where you're allowed to put in.
Hmm.
That was really cool because along the way we stopped at hot springs. Like we hiked in, went to a hot spring, came back out,
Oh,
continued
wow.
paddling, and we actually did it with a guide. Um, so it was easy, right? Like everything was done for us. They had the boards, they had the paddles, they asked us what we wanted for lunch the day before, and all we had to do was really just show up. And the one thing he said was like, how much paddle experience do you have? Because the winds are picking up.
Hmm.
And we're like, oh, we've got quite a bit of experience. And he's like, okay. But he brought an extra kayak paddle with him because he was actually in a kayak,
Okay.
just in case the winds were really bad. And I found that I was like, paddle, paddle, paddle. And I'm looking at the side and I see a rock. And I'm like, paddle, paddle, paddle. I still see the rock. I'm paddling, paddle, paddle.
Oh,
Still see the rock. And I'm like, I think I'll take that kayak paddle now,
yeah.
right? Just to get going. And I haven't used a kayak paddle in so long. I had all these blisters on my hands because I guess I wasn't holding it properly. And I was just like,
Oh,
well,
wow.
that's all right. Because it was a long paddle, and like I think it was around 12 miles. And yeah, those gusts of wind, they were quite the challenge.
Mm.
So,
Wow, that's amazing.
but it was cool. Like I would highly recommend it, and I think I'd really like to go back there and do it with probably bringing an inflatable and bringing some camping gear
Mm.
and camping at some of those hot spring sites, and making it a couple of day trip because I think that would be a lot of fun to do that.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. That was, you said Hoover Dam into the Colorado River?
Yeah, yeah. Hmm.
Wow. Wow.
And
Yeah.
I think the part where you get out is called Willow Springs, but don't quote me on that because it was years ago and I might have the name wrong.
Hmm.
But I think that's where you can put in as well and go upriver
Wow.
if you choose to do that.
That is
Yeah.
so cool. Have you, I'm gonna throw this out here because I have no idea. But
Okay.
since you're out west, have you been out to like Moab or Canyonlands? And then you may have seen pictures of it at least, where sometimes they have to like hike and have their like watercraft with them, whether it's something with like a giant inner tube or the kayak that kind of like folds up. But they only have to use it for so
Hmm.
long because they're doing hiking, and then they come across water that's literally like between like wall of red rock, and then they go through the water, and then they get back out, and then they hike a little bit more. Have you seen that?
I have just seen it online. I haven't had the opportunity to do that, but it does remind me a lot of being in Ontario and the lakes where you're portaging a canoe, like multiple times. I remember doing that a lot when I was a kid.
Okay.
Um, a lot different though, right? Because I think a canoe's heavy now
Yeah.
compared to a board. And then all your gear as well, like your food and camping supplies and things like that you're taking with you. But I would totally love to do an excursion like that. I think one of the biggest challenges with a paddleboard is, boards aren't exactly light. And I know there is a company that has what they claim is the lightest stand-up paddleboard with paddle, and it rolls up, and I think it's like 15 pounds in total, maybe for the whole thing, and you can hike with it. I can't imagine the paddle being all that great, when you're talking about how it comes apart and everything. I'd love to
Right.
try it out. But hey, if your goal is to hike and paddle, I think it makes a lot of sense because for most hikers, you don't want to carry a lot of weight. You try to bring down and cut that weight as much as possible, right?
Hmm.
And I'm going to say most stand-up paddlers are the same. nobody wants to schlep a 30-pound board to their car and load it on their car and then take it off their car. And then depending how far they have to walk from the parking spot to the water.
Yeah.
I know I don't want to carry a 30-pound board to go do that. And I have to say, the stand-up paddle boards, they're so much lighter because they're so much smaller. It's like, well, this is nothing. I can carry this like for a long time, right?
Right.
Compared to some of those recreational round nose boards, it's like, oh my God, this thing is so heavy.
Yeah, exactly. I know the one of the hikes that I've done with my paddleboard is an inflatable, and on my backpack shoulder strap thing was going down in Tahoe to Emerald Bay. So
oh, beautiful.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it's not very long of a hike, but it is all the way downhill because the lake, you're literally looking down at it. And I don't remember what was harder, going downhill or coming back up with it.
Yeah, it's interesting that sometimes uphill is actually easier. Sometimes.
I kind of thought it was easier, honestly. And that was after already all day being down there and paddleboarding and inflating, deflating, putting the gear back together. But I felt like coming back up was a little bit easier. A couple times you could take a stop, like go over to the side away from everyone else, out of people's way, and take a breather.
Wasn't it beautiful though?
It was so nice. And I mean, I liked using my own gear. I mean, I don't remember paddleboards being down at the end for rent, but kayaks were down there that you could rent. And yeah, it's just unique. It's just very different. I mean, the water, the clarity, but big, it's big water. It's
yeah. Was it cold, the water, when you were there?
Yes, it was very cold.
Yeah.
Very cold. I mean, a fun adventure though. I mean, for not having to go very far anyway, taking your own lunch and paddleboarding around there. And then they have this little island in the middle, which I don't remember the name of the island exactly, but it was something about a tea room. So there's a structure that you can kind of even climb up on these rocks. And it's very historic. It's part of a mansion that even overlooks Emerald Bay. And from what I understand, don't quote me on all of it, but it was called the tea room because it was like they would maybe canoe over, and that was like their little vacation spot, and kind of hang out in there and have a view and look out. And then the mansion is across from them now, and
nice.
Very unique.
That's really cool. We went to a different section on Lake Tahoe when we were there in October of 2020.
Okay.
And it was so beautiful. And, right now the name escapes me of exactly where we were. But that's where we had, this was an older inflatable that had been stored rolled up, and it wasn't ours. It was a friend of ours. And she kind of knew that, hey, there might be some issues with it. But all of a sudden we paddled out 3 miles, and then we heard a little psh, and we're like, oh no.
Oh, no.
Right. So my boyfriend had to paddle back. He was like, I'm going now. I'm like, okay. Cause I had my finger on the hole until he got ready to go.
Oh.
It was a seam that had just kind of come apart. And like I said, I think that boards now, the way they're being constructed, are inflatables are a lot different than when this one was made years and years ago.
Probably.
So he was paddling pretty fast because he kept thinking, what if it sinks? Like when you go down with the ship on those cartoons, like the ends come up and then he would be in the middle. But he made it back. But, the biggest concern there was how cold the water was.
Yeah.
And even though I have like a 14-foot inflatable, I think that we would have both had to have sat on my board and paddled together to be able to make it into shore. I don't think that he would have been able to sit on mine and I paddled, or vice versa. I think that the weight distribution would have just been too hard because it is an inflatable, right? So it's almost, when you have 2 people on it, it's like a mattress.
Yeah.
so that it was just interesting, like the scenarios that are going through my head. Well, what if, that board just goes down and we've got to figure out how to get to shore, because my thought was you swim to shore as fast as you can because that water was so cold. And then we figure out from there, how do you go and get another board or something and paddle it back over? But, my mind's always doing rescue scenarios. So I was like, all right, what do we do now?
It's good to have a plan B, C, probably D, just in case. Oh my gosh. Wow. That was a while ago, huh? That happened. And
yeah, and then we had it professionally repaired, and we took both inflatables to Hawaii.
Wow.
And I don't know what I think about using inflatables in Hawaii. And somebody said, seriously, Stephanie, you worried about that? And what I was worried about was, well, what if a shark comes and chomps on the inflatable? Then I have nothing, right? But if it's a hardboard and they chomp on the hardboard, well, I have the other half of the hardboard that I'm still on. And they're like, are you kidding me? You're going to be thrown off that board anyway. What are you even thinking about? And what are the chances a shark's going to come and get you? But, of course, this is going through my head.
Yeah, so. I mean, I don't know. Those are like, that's always kind of a thing because they have they try to do sometimes even deterrence of how like the shape. So like the shape of the board and then like arms and legs off the board, I believe, is like what they consider a seal, right? Or some other kind of thing that they would eat, I believe.
Definitely.
And then because I just saw an image of this and I'm trying to recreate it in my head, but that was definitely one like, okay, this is what sharks like. And then I think it was stripes. They don't like stripes or something. So like if you put stripes pattern on your board, then they're like, oh, okay, that's not food.
Right. Well, I have a friend who he has the bottom of his surfboard has stripes on it, and he wears a wetsuit that has stripes.
Oh, wow. See?
So, yeah. And I think, and it was funny because there's a Cook of the Day kind of stand-up paddling or surfing Instagram channel, and or Facebook, I don't know, some social media channel. And somebody took a picture of him that he didn't know and posted it. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's Vince. He's awesome. Like his brother designs his boards and airbrushes these amazing designs on them and everything. And it's funny because everybody then that saw it was like, oh, he's the best and he's great. And, I think that they're trying to make fun of people with the Cook of the Day kind of post, but none of us would make fun of him. We're like, he's awesome, right? And so it was just, I don't know if that's what that point of that channel is, and we don't care because we're like, he's the smart one. We're the dummies that don't have the stripes on our board. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny. I mean, I guess I don't know enough because I'm not there and I'm not living and seeing, but when I see stuff online or whatever, I'm like, well, it makes sense to me if that's what really is a deterrent then. And I think there's something else too, but I'm losing what it is. I know I saw it recently, somebody out on California coast. I don't know if it was a sound or if it was just the pattern thing, but there was something else that I just not thought of. But.
And somebody mentioned to me too, you know how we were talking about bright colors earlier, so you could be seen on a lake and things like that. Well, somebody was mentioning at the ocean, you don't really want to have super bright colors like pink because that's what the fish are, right? And so those fish get eaten, so you might not want to have bright colors. And of course, one day I've got like my bright pink rash guard, and I'm like, don't worry, guys, I'm attracting all the sharks to me. You'll be fine, kind of thing. And the next day I had a stripes, rash guard that actually had stripes on it, and I had no idea about the stripes. So that was just a fluke.
That was a coincidence.
But yeah, definitely.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Well, all of that sounds so fun and amazing. It has now taken my mind off of the rain that is happening all day here.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be beautiful there soon. You're going to have like such long days, which is awesome. We don't get days as long here, right? Like the sun sets at 9:30 or 10 where you are in the
Totally.
summer months, and you can get some really nice late night paddles in.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of jealous about that. And your water gets really warm, and
Yes.
this water doesn't get so warm. So
That is true. I am surprised about that with San Diego, but in San Diego water, but um when I was there, I did my paddleboarding training in San Diego, and I took on the full experience of renting a Airbnb sailboat. So I was on the water.
wow,
Yeah, right by the airport, and then like in a marina, and then I rented a bike and I brought my paddleboard with me, so it was an inflatable, and they found a spot for me to kind of keep it so I wouldn't have to travel back and forth to the training spot.
nice.
But I rode my bike all along the shore almost. It would break away from it a little bit, like the water. And all I remember was lots of military like training camps. And then everybody's in the park exercising, doing yoga. I was like, this is so cool. Like I'm in another world.
It definitely is. It's it's just an outdoor lifestyle where there's a lot of people who are active, right? And
Yeah.
it's easy to be active when it's sunny. It's not super, super hot. You have the ocean breezes. You've got the big parks on the water that you can go and do boot camps and things like that. You've got the paths. Like I think you were probably in Mission Bay.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's like San Diego's best hidden secret for the rest of the world. So Mission Bay offers so much. It was dredged, I think, in 1953, and it didn't exist the way it exists today. And then there was a hotel that was founded just kind of on the water. And with that hotel, other hotels came as well. And SeaWorld was built there. Whether you like it or don't like SeaWorld, that's a different story. But, a lot of things built up around it. And then you have a bunch of different marinas. And so, yeah, and there's Fiesta Island, which has a huge dog park for dogs to just run around. And so it's neat. Like Mission Bay has a lot to discover on it and a lot of things that you can do. And like I said, there's that bike path too. You probably were on as well. So
Yeah.
very neat. And it's protected, right? Like sometimes you will see, if you get lucky, a dolphin in Mission Bay, but you do see sea lions, starfish, Garibaldi. Kind of neat.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love it. Oh my gosh, I loved having you on and just sharing outdoorsy, sharing your Costa Rica experience. It's awesome. And
Oh, I definitely think you should go. I think you would really, really, really love it.
oh,
Tons of fun.
it has to happen. Definitely, it has to happen. I don't know when. Maybe next year, but I'm definitely getting that. I have that on my bucket list.
Yeah, I definitely want to go back. So let me know when you might go. Maybe we'll plan it to go together.
Oh,
I,
awesome.
I'd really like to go back. I think it was really great. And, my goal this year is to just really work out on my skills for stand-up paddle surfing and then go back and then be like, okay, look what I can do now. How do we get better? Right? Because I think it's always learning, right? You've always got the opportunity to learn.
And you'll have
Yeah.
you'll have a spot by you to probably practice, right?
I do, yeah. La Jolla Shores and San Onofre and Cardiff by the Sea. Those are all some great breaks. And they all offer something a little bit different. So,
Mm-hmm.
But the
Awesome.
water's cold. Oh, except for San Onofre because it's by a nuclear power plant. Although that nuclear power plant is not functioning right anymore, I don't believe. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's no longer in operation. So the water is, though, just a little bit warmer in San Onofre.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah,
Huh.
it is. It is.
Wow. Well, I enjoyed all of this. I really appreciate you coming on. I know we've been it's a
Thanks so much.
long time planning, but I love it.
Yeah, great. Well, I look forward to seeing all of your posts It's always so inspirational seeing everyone on their stand-up paddle boards doing yoga. And
Thank
I
you.
can't wait to follow your adventures this summer out on the waters.
Yeah, I know. Me too. I'm ready to go. I'm starting to make my pack list right now.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you so much.
Great. Have a wonderful day.